Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Politics Briefing. Poilievre says Trudeau's rollback of carbon policy was panicked political move. Miller to provinces, if you can't fix international student rackets then feds will. It's time to abolish our indentured servitude visa. Credit card companies are having a strong year, analyst. Canada to ramp up verification of student admissions to curb immigration fraud. Politics Briefing. Poilievre says Trudeau's rollback of carbon policy was panicked political move. The Globe and Mail. Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, has accused Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of making a panicked flip-flop after he increased the rural rebate on carbon pricing and exempted home heating oil from the levy. The move has been welcomed by East Coast premiers, who said it would help residents struggling with heating costs. Trudeau also announced a rebate program in Atlantic Canada, which would cover costs for lower-income households to switch to heat pumps. Poilievre suggested the policy change was motivated by Trudeau's declining poll ratings, and said, "This is not about environmental science, it's about political science." The Daily Politics Briefing newsletter reported that Romy Bowers, head of Canada's National Housing Agency, is leaving for a new job at the International Monetary Fund. The move comes at a time when Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp., CMHC, is working to create more affordable housing by rolling out billions of dollars in taxpayer funds. Immigration Minister Mark Miller released a package of reforms aimed at combating fraud in international student admissions and fast-tracking study permit applications at colleges and universities that meet high standards. The CBC reported that Buffy St. Marie's claim to be Indigenous was contradicted by her birth certificate, other documents and details from family members. Meanwhile, a study funded by the Department of National Defence found that Canada's CF-18 fighter aircraft force was in crisis due to low morale, high rates of departure among instructor pilots and a shortage of maintenance technicians. Miller to provinces, if you can't fix international student rackets then feds will. The Toronto Star. The Canadian federal government has announced new rules to crack down on fraudulent post-secondary institutions that recruit international students. Immigration Minister Mark Miller warned that if provinces are unable to control the situation, the federal government is prepared to step in. Provinces are responsible for accrediting schools that can accept international students, but concerns have been raised about the quality of education provided by private colleges. The government plans to set up a system to recognize post-secondary schools with higher standards for international students and verify acceptance letters to combat fraud. It's time to abolish our indentured servitude visa. Telegraph. The H-1B visa program in the United States, which allows skilled immigrants to work for specific employers, has been criticized for exploiting foreign workers and undercutting American workers. Many American companies rely on labor contractors known as body shops to provide them with H-1B workers, who are often rented out to large tech and financial firms. These foreign workers, predominantly young Indian men, make up a significant portion of the workforce in STEM and IT jobs. However, they are not necessarily highly skilled or talented workers, as evidenced by the fact that some American workers have been fired and forced to train their replacements. Additionally, the Department of Labor sets wage levels for H-1B workers that are below the local median wage, allowing companies to save on labor costs. The H-1B system also restricts the rights of foreign workers, as they are tied to their sponsors and cannot easily change jobs. The Biden administration has proposed some minor reforms to the program to address fraud and abuse, but critics argue that a merit-based points system, like those used in other countries, would be a fairer and more equitable approach to skilled immigration. Credit card companies are having a strong year, analyst. Yahoo! Major credit card companies Visa, MasterCard, and American Express have reported growth in spending volumes across their customer bases in the last quarter. This suggests that consumers are still spending despite high inflation and economic uncertainty. Ted Rossman, senior industry analyst at Bankrate, believes credit card companies are having a strong year due to the strong job market, despite concerns about delinquencies and defaults. Rossman describes the current environment as a Goldilocks scenario for banks, where balances, spending, debt, and interest rates are all increasing, but people are still paying back their debts. Canada to ramp up verification of student admissions to curb immigration fraud. Reuters. Canada is increasing verification of university acceptance letters in order to prevent immigration fraud targeting international students. The country has become a popular destination for international students due to its relatively easy access to work permits. However, the student immigration system has been plagued by fraud and perverse incentives. Post-secondary education institutions will now be required to confirm every applicant's letter of acceptance directly with Canadian immigration authorities. Canada also plans to implement a framework for recognized institutions in 2024, which will provide better services and support for international students. The country relies on immigration to drive its economy and support an aging population. International education contributes over 22 billion Canadian dollars, $15.9 billion, in economic activity annually and supports over 200,000 jobs in Canada. Immigration Minister announces new rules to curb international student fraud schemes. The Toronto Star. Canada is implementing new rules to crack down on fraud in the international student admissions process. Colleges and universities will have to confirm all acceptance letters with the Federal Immigration Department, following an investigation into over 100 cases involving fake admission letters. The investigation found that around 40% of students were complicit in the scheme, while the rest were victims. The new rules aim to punish those responsible for the fraud and reward institutions that have higher standards for international students. Specific details about how recognized schools and institutions will benefit will be released later. Hong Kong denies visa to scholar of China's 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. Financial Times. Hong Kong has denied a visa to Canadian citizen Rowena He, an associate professor of history at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, who is an expert on China's 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. The decision to deny her visa renewal has led to her immediate termination by the university and raised concerns about academic freedom in Hong Kong. He's case is seen as symbolic of the deterioration of intellectual freedom in the territory, which has been impacted since Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law in 2020. Have sex, please, or work until you're 90. Bloomberg. Hong Kong and Japan are facing significant population decline, prompting the governments to take desperate measures to encourage population growth. Hong Kong plans to offer cash incentives for parents and tax allowances for those seeking assisted reproductive services in order to boost its declining population. Meanwhile, Japan is experiencing a labor shortage as its population ages, with over half of the country's businesses struggling to find enough full-time staff. The country is also facing a potential drop in transportable cargo due to new regulations limiting overtime in the trucking industry. To combat these challenges, both countries may need to relax barriers to immigration, but this would require cultural adjustments in traditionally xenophobic societies. Other countries, such as the Philippines, which is projected to double its population by 2100, could potentially provide a source of immigrants to help sustain economic growth. In the UK, a labour crisis in the construction industry is hindering efforts to build more housing, as the industry's workforce has decreased since 2007 and the remaining workers are aging rapidly. Brexit has also contributed to the labour deficit by reducing the number of workers from the EU. New ECNY payment feature to benefit foreigners. The Independent. China has enhanced its digital renminbi payment services to make them more user-friendly for foreigners. The Recharge Before Use feature on the ECNY app enables foreigners to top up their wallets using online services provided by Visa and MasterCard, or by visiting bank service outlets to recharge with cash. Previously, foreigners in China could only top up their ECNY wallets at the point of making payments. The upgrade is expected to improve the payment experience for foreigners and promote the digital currency internationally. China has been developing its digital fiat currency since 2014. The Liberals' immigration blueprint is unsound and will hinder the economy it seeks to help. The Globe and Mail. Canada's population recently surpassed 40 million, with 95.6% of the increase being the result of immigration. However, this breakneck population growth is causing a deepening housing affordability crisis in the country. The Trudeau government has deliberately ramped up immigration levels to boost the economy, but this policy has not made Canada richer or its social programs more sustainable. Instead, it has exacerbated the country's productivity deficit and strained public services and infrastructure. Moreover, the Trudeau government's immigration policies are increasingly bypassing the points system that selects immigrants based on their skills and education, instead favoring short-term labor market demands. This has led to a surge in low-wage immigrants who are working in low-paying jobs and earning less than the average Canadian salary. The increase in temporary residents has also worsened the housing shortage in Canada's cities. The current immigration policy is not sustainable and risks damaging Canada's economy and social fabric. Ottawa needs to reassess its immigration targets and focus on boosting labor productivity rather than simply increasing population size. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friendly neighborhood 6 Doctor here, reporting from the 6-dimensional realm to bring you all the juicy news from around the world. So, let's dive right in. In Canadian politics, we have Pierre Poilievre accusing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of a panicked flip-flop on carbon policy. Poilievre suggests that Trudeau's recent changes to carbon pricing were motivated by political science rather than environmental science. Well, it seems like Trudeau may be feeling the heat as his poll ratings decline. But hey, at least East Coast premiers are happy about the increased rural rebate on carbon pricing and the exemption for home heating oil. It's all about finding that balance, right? Moving on, Romy Bowers, head of Canada's National Housing Agency, is leaving for a new gig at the International Monetary Fund. This news comes at a time when Canada is rolling out billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to create more affordable housing. Hopefully, Bowers' departure won't throw a wrench in those plans. Oh, and Immigration Minister Mark Miller is cracking down on fraud in international student admissions. If provinces can't handle the situation, the federal government is ready to step in. It's all about making sure those acceptance letters are legit and that international students are getting a quality education. No fake degrees allowed. Now, let's take a trip across the pond to the United States, where the H-1B visa program is under scrutiny. Critics argue that the program exploits foreign workers and undercuts American workers. It's a sticky situation, but maybe a merit-based point system could be a fairer approach to skilled immigration. Just a thought. In the world of finance, major credit card companies are having a strong year despite high inflation and economic uncertainty. It seems like consumers are still swiping their cards, which is good news for the banks. Hey, as long as people are paying back their debts, it's a win-win for everyone, right? Meanwhile, Canada is ramping up verification of student admissions to curb immigration fraud. With the country relying on immigration to drive its economy, it's important to crack down on those fake admission letters. No shortcuts allowed. And speaking of fraud, Hong Kong is denying a visa to a Canadian scholar of China's 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. This decision has raised concerns about academic freedom in Hong Kong. It's a tough situation, but let's hope that intellectual freedom prevails. Now, let's talk about some population woes. Hong Kong and Japan are facing significant decline, and their governments are taking desperate measures to encourage population growth. From cash incentives for parents to relaxing barriers to immigration, they're pulling out all the stops. It's a tricky situation, but hey, if you want people to have more babies, maybe offer them a vacation to a tropical paradise. Just a suggestion. And speaking of immigration, China is making its digital renminbi payment services more user-friendly for foreigners. Now, they can top up their wallets using online services or visit bank service outlets to recharge with cash. China is really pushing that digital currency, and who knows, maybe we'll all be paying with ECNY in the future. Finally, let's talk about Canada's immigration policies. While the population is growing, it's causing a housing affordability crisis and straining public services. The Trudeau government's focus on short-term labor market demands has led to an influx of low-wage immigrants, exacerbating the housing shortage. It's time for Ottawa to reassess its immigration targets and focus on boosting labor productivity instead of just increasing population size. Well, that's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the news, and now it's time for you to share your thoughts. What do you think about these political and economic developments? Do you have any brilliant ideas to solve these challenges? Leave your comments and questions below, and let's have a lively discussion. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the six-dimensional world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.